I shall govern in name, but it will be you who govern in fact. These were the words of William Bentinck, Governor General of Bengal, to the great thinker Jeremy Bentham. The ideas of Jeremy Bentham, James Mill, and other liberal thinkers of Britain had a great influence on this reform-minded Governor General, William Bentinck. And therefore, it is no wonder that we remember his period as one that was dominated by a series of humane and sensitive reforms for Indians. Today, in this series of modern Indian history, I, Jawwad Kazi, will be discussing some of the key measures that we see during the period of Governor General William Bentinck. Also, towards the end, we will see how Sindh will be annexed by East India Company. William Bentinck was born in a blue-blooded aristocratic family, a family of rich military pedigree. His father was a duke and had served as Prime Minister of Britain. William Bentinck himself started his career in military and would go on to become a colonel in the British Army. He had served with distinction in the Anglo-French wars, both Revolutionary Wars as well as Napoleonic Wars. And seeing his service in the military, he was even appointed as Governor of Madras. But during his governorship of Madras, the infamous Vellore mutiny took place, which we have discussed in our class earlier. The soldiers of the East India Company were forbidden from wearing some traditional markers of their religion and customs. They were forced to wear a certain type of hat. And consequently, the soldiers felt that this was a process of Christianizing them and they revolted against their paymasters. This led to the mutiny, which lasted for a day, was brief but very intense. William Bentinck was considered to be guilty of adamancy, while it was visible that the soldiers were upset about these changes. And consequently, his governorship was cut short and he was called back to London. Now, subsequently, over the next several years, William Bentinck will be keen to come back to India and to finish his Indian career on a high note. He was called once again to become Governor of Madras, but he was not so keen in 1819 to become the Governor of Madras. And later on, he will get the prize posting of Governor General of Bengal. Now, when he comes as Governor General of Bengal, we will see that several significant developments will take place during his Governor Generalship. We are going to discuss some of these things in detail now. He will become the first Governor General of India as the Charter Act of 1833 will be passed during this period and the status of Governor General of Bengal will be elevated to Governor General of India. Consequently, he will be the first Governor General of India in that sense. A liberal-minded, a reform-oriented and a humane administrator that he was, he will take several energetic steps to resolve many challenges that EIC was facing in India and also several problems that Indians were also confronting. He will abolish the sati, suppress thuggy, bring about judicial reforms, improve the financial condition of the company, give Indians better opportunities for joining services. He will also start institutions like the first medical college, promote commerce, start tea garden in India, among many other things. Let us now dive a little deeper and see the significant contributions that will be made by Governor General of India, William Bentinck. Now, William Bentinck, when he assumes the office in India, at that time, East India Company, like always, is once again in a big financial mess. The East India Company is suffering from a deficit of 1.5 million pounds, which was a very huge sum for those days. This came at the back of the Anglo-Burmese War. The war had been won, territory had been increased, but then the financial cost of it had crumbled the company. So one of the primary goal of William Bentinck, like previous Governor Generals too, will be to resolve the financial crisis that EIC was facing. And he will be immensely successful at this. Let us now therefore see what will be the financial reforms that William Bentinck will implement. Unless a Governor General address this issue, all other initiatives of his would come to a naught. And therefore, it's crucial to understand the financial reforms and their success as they were implemented during Bentinck's time. So context is that of the Burmese War, and the financial situation of the company is terrible. For this reason, he established two committees for recommending measures related to civil and military expenses. These committees gave their detailed recommendations, and based on that, William Bentinck energetically implemented many reforms. What were the steps that he implemented? Let us now see them one by one. He reduced the bhatta of military officers. Military officers used to get a bhatta in addition, that was like an allowance. Bhatta, the word in Hindi literally means an allowance. That was in addition to their salary. Now, Europeans were paid very well to serve under East India Company already. And over and above that, they were paid a bhatta also, that is an allowance too. So this was to be reduced so that the expenses could be curtailed. Secondly, allowances to civil servants were also reduced. Now, once again, civil services in India was a very, very attractive career. It used to take a lot to lobby and get the position of a civil servant here in India. The court of directors had the power of patronage, and they used to appoint people as civil servants in India. So civil servants' allowances were also reduced. Military officers' allowances were reduced. Government adopted better measures for revenue collection. For example, the Mahalwari system will be implemented, will be reformed and implemented during William Bentinck's times. Now, Rayotwari system had, as we discussed in our previous class, Rayotwari system was an improvement over the Zamindari system. It had removed the Zamindar from between the state and the taxpayer. But then the problem was that it required a much bigger bureaucratic apparatus. Mahalwari tries to overcome this by having settlements with one mahal, that is one village or an estate, so that the East India Company will not have to deal with individual taxpayers. East India Company will only deal with the village headman. This made the job much more easy and, most importantly, cost efficient for East India Company. So in that sense, it was an advancement over Rayotwari system also from EIC's perspective. Indians were to be employed wherever possible. Now, William Bentinck was a utilitarian. He was a liberal-minded person. He is coming in India at that stage where the ideas of liberalism are at their peak in Britain. And therefore, we see that he is having some humaneness also regarding extending opportunities to Indians. And furthermore, it also made financial sense for East India Company. Wherever possible, Indians were to be employed, and that would help EIC to reduce the cost because Europeans were highly paid human resource. Indians could do the same work at a fraction of that cost. Hence, Indians were to be employed. Opium trade was to be regularized and licensed. Opium or afim has been traditionally cultivated in many parts of India. Bengal, Bihar, Central India, areas of Uttar Pradesh. It has been cultivated there. The traditional drink of bhang is prepared out of it. Now, this was a very lucrative item of export to China. Chinese tea and other Chinese products were in great demand in Britain as well as in other parts of Europe. East India Company wanted to trade with China. But the problem with Chinese trade was that the Chinese were not ready to buy anything that EIC had to offer. And therefore, to buy Chinese stuff, EIC had to use, bullion. And this made that trade less profitable. So for this reason, East India Company started to export opium grown in India to China. And although it was illegal and banned there in China, all of this was done, in a clandestine smuggling sort of manner. This had a very disastrous effect on the Chinese society. Within a few years, we will see that the entire Chinese generation will be destroyed because of addiction to opium. And this will also lead to the famous Opium Wars. The start of all of that is during this period. On a side note, guys, the start of the Tatas initially, it happened through this same opium trade. Later on, they branch out into many other areas and become the great conglomerate that we know them for today. But then the start was during this period with opium trade. He stimulated production of iron, coal, tea, coffee, improved irrigation systems so that revenue of the country could improve. The result? These energetic measures of William Bentinck transformed the financial situation of the company dramatically. From a point where they were having rupees 1 crore per year of deficit, the company went on to have a surplus of 2 crores by 1835, which is quite a dramatic turnaround. So in that sense, the most important area that the court of directors were expecting, the British government was expecting, William Bentinck was able to deliver on that. Before I go into other reforms, guys, of William Bentinck, and very interesting ones are coming up, let me give you a brief announcement. We have started with our prelims to interview batch from 22nd of September. This batch, which is available in English, Hindi, as well as English mediums, is an evening batch for those students who want to prepare for UPSC 2024's attempt. The huge success of earlier P2I batches has, in a way compelled us to once again bring back this fresh offering for those of you who have not yet enrolled. This, my dear students, as I keep telling you, is the one-stop solution for your entire civil services preparation journey. This will bring to you live classes by expert faculties, including yours truly also. You will get a lot of good content for preparing for this exam, like this book that many of you have now ordered for, and many others also. It will give you hand-holding through mentors who have experience of appearing at interview stage of this examination. These mentors will personally chalk out your plans and resolve your queries one-to-one basis. This is a great offering for you guys, and you can get a handsome discount on the fee as well by using my code JDLive. By using this code, you get a discount and you don't pay 70,000 in case you pay only, in that case, you pay only about 30,000 rupees. This is your opportunity, guys. Don't think anymore about it and immediately enroll for this batch. To download my notes of these lectures and earlier ones also, you can reach my Telegram channel, Jawwad Kazi UPSC Preparation. Scan this QR code and you can join my Telegram channel to get latest updates and notes of my lectures. So having seen number one, the financial reforms of William Bentinck, now let us talk about some other reforms that he took. The most famous reform that we associate William Bentinck with is, of course, his abolition of sati and other cruel rites in India. What is meant by sati? A little bit of background before we see the actual measures. The word sati refers to a pure and virtuous woman. A pure and virtuous woman who is so devoted to her husband that on his death, she continues that perpetual and uninterrupted conjugal union. Marriage is a sacrament in Indian society. And when the husband dies, the sati, the virtuous woman, actually cannot bear the life over here on earth as such, and instead she prefers to die on the funeral pyre of her husband so that she would be, in perpetual union with her husband. That is the idea of sati. So traditionally, as you all know, the practice was there for several centuries in India. We hear about many foreign travelers also who have written about this practice. Ibn Battuta, who came from West Asia, from Morocco to be more precise. While entering India, he had seen this practice for the first time, and he writes in his Rehla that when he saw that, he got so horrified that he felt dizzy and fell off from his camel. It was not as if this practice was not, tried to control earlier or stop earlier. We see many instances where rulers did take some initiatives. Emperor Akbar, for example, tried to restrict sati. He, in fact, personally traveled to one of the Rajput chiefs, palace, where his daughter-in-law was going to go sati, and he tried to convince that family to not do it. Similarly, Marathas had also forbidden sati in their dominion. Portuguese at Goa and French at Chandernagore also took some active steps in this direction. EIC, on the other hand, had been more circumspect, because EIC's policy was that we will not interfere into the internal affairs, social and religious issues of Indians. The early company officials very often were Indophiles also, and they felt that Oriental cultures should not be tampered with. And it also was because of some political, sagacity, that if these issues are interfered with, then Indians will take offense and their plans in India will naturally be affected. So multiple reasons led EIC to not take any action against this. Governor Generals like Cornwallis, Minto, Lord Hastings, they did take some steps to control it. Okay. So that, it is not done forcefully and things like that, but nothing really concrete emerged out of it. All right. Now, the effort to stop this actually starts with Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who reportedly had seen, one of his close relative go sati, was deeply affected by it from within. And then he went on to launch a campaign to convince people, stopping them from doing this. Raja Ram Mohan Roy used to go to the ghats where sati was practiced often and try to convince people with logic and with evidence from the old texts to show that sati as a practice as such was not mandated in the original texts of Hinduism. But he soon realized that this type of behavioral change campaign was not having a big impact, and till the time it had impact, many women will have to go sati. And for that reason, although while pursuing this campaign, he also starts to urge the British government to take some steps to stop this measure. His attempts did lead to awakening of people's conscience, and ultimately William Bentinck took up this issue with earnestness. He ordered an inquiry, collected facts and figures about the sati cases that were happening. He obtained the views of different people in this process, important people like army officers, judges, police department people, to understand what will be the reaction of people if British government, East India Company's government actually bans this practice. Now, having got positive response from many quarters, William Bentinck decided that there is no danger of any mutiny or any civil commotion because of banning of this practice, and then accordingly he will pass a regulation in December 1829 which declared the practice of sati illegal and punishable by criminal courts as culpable homicide. Culpable homicide. Culpable homicide has multiple roots, guys. This is my favorite area, etymology of words, how words are formed. Culpable, culp means blame. Culpable is blamable then. Homicide comes from, homo sapien, that is human being, and cid is side, means to kill. So genocide means killing many people. Matricide, killing of mother. Patricide, killing of father. Fratricide, frat means brother. Fratricide, killing of brother. In this manner, English words are derived out of some key root words. If you know the root words well, then it is easy to remember a lot of English words. I'll recommend that you read root words of English and try to build your vocabulary. It will definitely help you a lot in your preparation too. All right. 1830, this provision of Bengal was now extended to Madras and Bombay as well. Sati was considered as a culpable homicide. Apart from this, he also took measures against other cruel rites. For example, there were practices of infanticide. In certain communities, when a girl child was born, often that girl child was killed. That is called as infanticide. The same thing that has later manifested with the help of technology in the form of feticide. At the core is the desire for having a son. And that desire for having son, that so-called Kul Deepak, leads parents to do these sort of things. Despite being illegal, we know that these sort of things, these sort of cases have come before the law enforcement. So during those times, technology was not there, so it was even more cruel, where a baby girl was often killed, infanticide. And also there were some cases of child sacrifices in various types of rituals in certain communities. So to stop this, there were certain regulations that had been passed earlier, but then still these practices continued. And therefore, William Bentinck took very vigorous steps to stop these practices. He passed orders to stop such practices, whether it was infanticide or child sacrifice ritual in certain communities, like it used to happen in Bengal on the Saugar Island. And finally, these practices were brought under control. So William Bentinck took these humane measures out of a larger concern for people at large. It wasn't just about East India Company. It was in the larger interest. Next area where William Bentinck has made a contribution is the suppression of Thuggy. Suppression of Thuggy. Now, who were the thugs? Thugs were a band of hereditary assassins and robbers. Band of hereditary assassins and robbers. They used to prey upon innocent and defenseless travelers. Especially, there were many places where this was going on in India, but mostly, in central India, on the trade routes that connected Deccan with Agra. Along those trade routes, there used to be these gangs of thugs who used to dress up as either travelers or, as people who are going on some spiritual journey, some pilgrimage, and they used to befriend small groups of travelers, and then seeing an opportunity, they used to strangle that particular traveler and loot all his belongings. Their name was derived from a type of scarf that they used as a noose to tighten around people's necks so that they could be suffocated to, strangulated to death. Okay. There was a thug who was captured later, and he confessed to have killed more than 900 people. Can you imagine that? More than 900 people with one single scarf. That was the only weapon that he used for killing. So these were professional killers basically. And they are, if I may take the liberty of using Hindi word, their atank was so high that travel along these trade routes had become very difficult. Naturally, this affected law and order, this affected revenue for East India Company also. So, why was this happening? During the downfall of Mughal Empire, we see that there is a fracturing of polity. Consequently, the establishment of law and order is not very strong. There are many areas which are in a flux. Nobody knows whose control is there at that point of, which kingdom is ruling over those areas. Because of all of this chaos of 18th century, the thugs found a very congenial environment to actually go about doing their activities. These thugs came from both communities, Hindus, and there were some Muslims also in that. And these people used to worship goddess Kali, and the killings were basically done to offer those deaths or as sacrifices to whatever religious beliefs they had. So it had that element of beliefs as well. It wasn't just professional killing. Victims' heads were sometimes offered in sacrifices, and many of these were very hardened criminals. Of course, it requires a very different type of a soul, a dark black soul, to kill so many people mercilessly for no rhyme or a reason. They could have just looted and run away with the property. But then they used to ensure that there is no evidence left behind. The bodies were, buried. So that shows a mindset of a hardened criminal. When later one of the thug was captured and he uh, was given the option of becoming a witness and confess to what all he and others had done, he took the police to a place where several hundred bodies had been buried by the thugs over the years. So these were really hardened criminals. Organizationally, they were very well organized, and consequently, the police found it very difficult to actually crack them and get hold of their gangs because they would not break. They had very specific codes. They had rituals. They had their own sign language. They had their own specific words which meant specific things. So even when they are sitting with other fellow travelers who are they are preys and talking amongst themselves, they could use these codes. They could use these codes and communicate what is to be done next without their victims even having a hint of what they are up to. So it was a very structured, organized kind of an idea. William Bentinck understood the importance of bringing down these thugs, and he sent a huge force to suppress them. William Sleeman, whom you can see on the screen, a lot of credit goes to this officer, British officer William Sleeman. He was a military officer and also appointed as commissioner for suppression of Thuggy. Through painstaking efforts, he was able to penetrate these gangs of the thugs, not himself, but through decoys, of course. He was able to penetrate, get information, get some of them arrested, and then use them to reach others. And this is how the entire, Thuggy gang was actually captured. Several hundreds of them were captured. Many of them were killed, sent to long-term deportations, so on and so forth. So this is the story of Thuggy, guys, which also comes to an end during William Bentinck's period. Now, this word thug has also become a loan word in English. What are loan words? Loan words are those words that have been incorporated into English from other languages. So Hindi has seen a lot of words being borrowed by English language. Thug is one of them. So like jungle, loot, almirah, these are all Hindi words anglicized into English. Do you know any more such words? Let me know in the comment box below. What other words can you recall which are actually Hindi or Indian words which have been anglicized or taken as loan words into English? All right, fine. Now let us go to next very important development of this period, which is the education minute. During Bentinck's time, a committee on public instruction was created. This was done to study how education should be extended to Indians. In Charter Act of 1813, 1 lakh per annum was promised for spending on developing education in India. Charter Act of 1833, this was increased to 10 lakh per annum. But the question was, what sort of education should be provided in India? Whether it would be an Anglicist of English education based on Western sciences given in English, or it should be an Orientalist education that would be based on Indian traditional learning and in Indian languages. This committee got divided into two halves, some supporting the Anglicist way of instruction, whereas others supporting the Orientalist. Orient means the East. So Eastern type of education, some were supporting, whereas others were talking about Anglicist education. This got resolved by Lord Macaulay, whom you can see on the screen here, who was the chairman of this committee. Lord Macaulay issued his famous resolution of 1835, which is also called as the Education Minute of 1835. Education Minute of 1835. Thomas Babington Macaulay was a historian and a person who was having liberal ideas, but then also a touch of racism and supremacist kind of philosophy. Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay did not think that any intellectual achievements of the East, whether India or West Asia or China for that matter, they were of any caliber as compared to that of the achievements of the West. He is famously to have said, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but the essence is there. He had said something to the sort of that one shelf of a good library in the West was worth more than all the books of the East. Something to that effect he had said, which shows his views. And naturally, since his views were so decidedly in favor of the Western education and learning, you know what the outcome of this committee and this resolution would be. Official language of India in higher administration would be English, and in terms of education also, English would be used at higher levels. So since 1935, we'll see that English language, literature, natural sciences, etc. would be the basis of higher education in India. So this was a very decisive step, an important threshold, after which education imparted in India will have a certain specific type of character. Also, Macaulay did not believe that it was company's responsibility to educate the whole of India. Company ultimately was here for its own gain. But yes, company did need a human resource. Company did need a market in the changed context of industrial revolution. And for that reason, Lord Macaulay supported downward filtration theory of education. This downward filtration theory meant that EIC will provide education only to a limited number of people, and that education will be of this sort, Western type, in English language. And then it will be the responsibility of those educated Indians to take the fruits of education to their fellow countrymen. So we start at the top, and then it is hoped that these things will slowly filter downwards. That is what is meant by downward filtration theory. The end goal of all of this was, according to Macaulay, to have Indians who are Indians in blood, but British in taste. After all, they required Indians who would want to wear Manchester cloth in the form of a suit over their dhoti kurta, or a sherwani made out of Western cloth. Unless and until they were trained in Western knowledge and sciences, why would they find Western way of life attractive? Why would they spend their hard-earned money to buy Yardley like talcum powders of the West? So that was the whole idea, to have Indians who are Indians in blood but British in taste. This was about the education minute. Now let us see William Bentinck's judicial reforms. What sort of changes he will bring about in the judiciary. Let's see that. Separate Sadar Diwani and Sadar Nizamat Adalats were created now at Allahabad. Separate Sadar Diwani and Sadar Nizamat. In our earlier classes, we have seen what is the distinction and what is the gradation. So I won't repeat that again over here for the sake of brevity. Why Allahabad is being selected over here? Remember, British possession in India has now expanded, and consequently, having a supreme Indian Adalat at Allahabad made justice more accessible for people towards the West. And for that reason, he made these Adalats available in Allahabad also. He abolished provincial and circuit courts that were brought about during Lord Cornwallis's time. Cornwallis had created provincial courts for civil cases and circuit courts for criminal cases. But these courts had not functioned effectively and had often led to increased backlog of cases. And in any case, people who had the means, they would go on to appeal to the Sadar, Diwani or Nizamat Adalats. So for that reason, William Bentinck felt that the state is unnecessarily spending money on maintaining these courts. So he has these courts abolished. Duties of these were now transferred to the magistrates. Magistrates are given these additional duties. He very significantly gave option of vernacular language instead of Persian in lower courts. Now, Persian was the language that was used in lower courts because of the Mughal legacy. Medieval India times, Persian was the language that was used for administration, for diplomacy, for justice related things. But then Persian ultimately was a foreign language. and common masses could not speak and understand it. Therefore, it was felt necessary that vernacular languages must be used instead of Persian, and hence this reformative measure was taken. In the higher courts, English to be used, which is the practice that continued after independence also in the higher courts. Qualified Indians were to be appointed in lower judiciary. In the lower judiciary, some space is now opened for Indians, and they could reach the ranks of Sadar Amin posts in the judiciary. Sadar Amin posts. Okay, so these were some of the judicial reforms of Lord Cornwallis. When he abolishes these courts, guys, also remember the financial crisis. He wants to reduce the cost. These courts have not delivered, and moreover, they are costing the company. So that's why they are removed. These were regarding judiciary. Now a few reforms regarding princely states, or measures regarding princely states. In early phase of his governor generalship, William Bentinck will try to stay away from interfering in the affairs of princely states in India. But in the second half, he becomes proactive and starts to interfere. This was done because he felt that some of these princely states were not providing proper governance. Misgovernance was often a charge that was used by East India Company to attach princely states to their territory. Which states were annexed in this manner? Mysore in 1831. Remember, Mysore was created as the subsidiary ally in 1799 after the death of Tipu. And now in 1831, it is annexed. This will remain so till 1881, when it will be revived again. Coorg in 1834 and Central Chachar, that's in Assam, in 1834, these will be annexed on the plea of misgovernment. Misgovernment. This same tactic will be used against Awadh in 1856. In 1856, it will be used. Okay. Russian advances in Central Asia also caused William Bentinck to take certain specific moves or measures. The Russian Empire, the colossal Russian Empire, which was like, from end to end over Asia, it was towering, wanted to expand southwards via Afghanistan. The Russians, as Peter the Great used to say, wanted their place in the sun. Russians wanted warm waters. And one direction for their advancement was towards the Mediterranean via the Crimean Peninsula. And another was via Central Asia through Afghanistan. Now, they never succeeded in that as such, but then that ambition was always there. East India Company knew this. The Britishers were people who could foresee what can happen in next several years. And consciously, therefore, East India Company will try to interfere in the politics of Afghanistan, Iran, Central Asia for the same reason. The 19th century will be a century of rivalry between British Empire and the Russian Empire. And this intense rivalry between the two is called as the Great Game. In some of my other lectures, I have detailed about how this Great Game actually was played out in 19th century. Guys, in the last century, when the Russians, USSR, it came into Afghanistan, it was that same old drive that they had, that they should, occupy Afghanistan, and then from there they can further increase their influence. It's an outcome of this old ambition, the Great Game. So for this reason, William Bentinck signed a treaty of perpetual friendship with Maharaja Ranjit Singh, so that Maharaja Ranjit Singh, Punjab, who is en route towards Afghanistan and Central Asia, is at good terms. He also signed treaties with the Amirs of Sindh. The Amirs of Sindh, who were Baloch chiefs, with them also he signed a treaty so that they are also at good terms. He supported the claim of Shah Shuja in Kabul. Shah Shuja in Kabul. Afghanistan was very important. At this stage, East India Company was not in a position to go and dominate over Afghanistan. So the next best thing was to actually have a ruler who is, under your influence. For that reason, Shah Shuja's claim in Kabul was supported by Bentinck. Okay. Another major development during Bentinck's period, in fact, a very significant one, is the Charter Act of 1833. This we have discussed in the immediately preceding lecture. So we won't go into the details, but a quick revision can be done over here. Governor General of Bengal now became Governor General of India. Bombay and Madras lost legislative powers. During the company rule, there is an increasing trend of centralization towards Calcutta. Bombay and Madras are increasingly subordinated to Calcutta. And an outcome of that is they even lose their legislative power, which will be revived after revolt of 1857. Number of executive council members was increased to now 4. Fourth member was the law member, and Lord Macaulay became the first law member. Law commission was also to be created for codification of laws. The great Napoleonic Code. Napoleon had created a code which was uniformly applied across his empire, and it had led to a lot of administrative efficiency. A similar idea was implemented over here in India also, and then we'll see in 1859, 60, we will have the IPC, CPC, CRPC, those codes will come up because of this process. Lord Macaulay will be heading that law commission. Monopoly in tea and trade with China also was now ended. So now whatever remnants were there of East India Company's privilege in terms of trade were all abolished. Earlier in Charter Act of 1813, already monopoly had been abolished except for these two, tea trade and second trade with China. Now even that was finished. Now the company was no more a commercial entity. It is not a commercial entity. 4 Diwani courts abolished, but circuit courts continued, which later will be abolished in any case. No discrimination on the basis of color, creed, place of birth in civil services recruitment. This was a very crucial provision, and it is said that it was because of the influence of William Bentinck. He wanted to associate more and more Indians with the British administration, and that led to this very remarkable measure in the Charter Act. Earlier governor generals had consciously kept Indians away from administration, especially the powerful positions, except for very lower posts. Lord Cornwallis is famous to have been very racist, and he had a very poor opinion which he wrote about, that Indians were really not good enough for these kind of jobs. 10 lakh per annum for education would be given. We have seen that. Now public services. Humiliating distinctions that prevented Indians from being recruited into the administration were removed. These were approved by earlier governor generals, but then Charter Act for the first time removed these distinctions, as we saw. But practically speaking, this was only a theoretical thing, and no such thing was actually implemented. There was tremendous opposition in England, especially from within the company, to stop this. The company had enjoyed something called as the patronage system, and they did not want to give up on this. Okay, but nevertheless, they had to compromise, and merit-based appointments will definitely start, although Indians will really not get a share. It will take some time. In Charter Act of 1853, for the first time, open competitive exams will be used, but those will be held in London. So Indians again over there will be deprived that opportunity because it was difficult for Indians to go and compete in London. Nevertheless, through these incremental measures, administration became more accessible to Indians. So I hope you guys got this measure regarding the public services. Now we'll see the annexation of Sindh. Sindh is a geographical region, southeastern part of Pakistan, close to India's western coast. It had always been an important center for trade and commerce, right from IVC times. As you know, Indus River actually enters or joins the Arabian Sea along the Sindh's coast. It was always invaded by foreign powers for these very reasons. It is at a very important juncture of major civilization. Indian civilization on one side and the West Asian civilization on the other. and it is at a juncture of these two and is known for its riverine trade connecting with the Arabian Sea. Therefore, Sindh always saw a lot of invasions coming from different parts. Early in the 19th century, English enjoyed some trade privileges as a farman by Mughal ruler of in 1630 had given them right to trade over here. They even had a factory in Sindh. Kalora chiefs. Kalora chiefs were ruling in this area when the Mughals were declining. But then in the 18th century, they are then replaced by 4 Talpura chiefs called as Char Yar, who were actually of Baloch ethnicity. Balochistan is to the west of Sindh. Balochistan is a tribal area, fierce warlike people over there. Baloch people, they invade this area and they replace the Kalora chiefs, and now Sindh is ruled by 4 Talpura chiefs called as Char Yar. Now East India Company was very keen in the area of Sindh because it lay along the route of probable invasions into India. Therefore, East India Company wanted to have control over these areas. And hence we see they sign a treaty of eternal friendship in 1809 with Sindh. This was done in the context of rising threat of the French once again. Napoleon and Russian ruler Tsar, they had come to terms with each other in Europe after some brief fight, and Napoleon during those wars was very impressed by the Russian Tsar and he wanted to have good relations with him. In fact, in a documentary I have heard that he was so impressed that he wrote a very evocative letter about appreciating the Tsar to his wife. Napoleon had this practice of writing letters on a daily basis to his wife in Paris, and he wrote a great letter about the Russian ruler. So he was enamored by the Russian ruler. Now they two had formed an alliance together. Both of them are enemies of the British. Now naturally, the probability of these two uniting and fulfilling each other's ambitions of attacking the British here in India was a grim reality that East India Company had to face. Therefore, East India Company will try to have good relations with Maharaja Ranjit Singh as well as the chiefs of Sindh. In 1832, a new treaty was signed which allowed East India Company to have free passage and trade through Sindh. Okay, but this was not for any military purposes, this was only for trade. So 1832, the relations develop further and a new treaty is signed. Later, the English will show their real claws, and in 1839, they will force a treaty of subsidiary alliance on the Sindhi chiefs, the Sindh chiefs. Context was conflict with the Sikh kingdom. In the north, there was the Sikh kingdom established by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who will pass away before this. And in that conflict, the Sikh kingdom will occupy some areas of the chiefs of Sindh, and consequently, they will feel worried about the future wars. East India Company will again use this conflict between the two and offer their assistance in the form of subsidiary alliance. So they forced the chiefs of Sindh to sign this alliance under the pretext that they will help them against the rising Sikh power. The three armies agreed to have a British force. Earlier they were not allowed, only trade was allowed. But now a British force was allowed at Shikarpur and Bakkar. And furthermore, these troops, who are East India Company's troops, will be paid for by the Sindh chiefs, by the 4 chiefs of Sindh. 3 lakhs per annum will be paid. The Amirs also agreed not to have any foreign relations without the company's consent. They will not have any foreign relations also. This, by the way, is the map of the Sindh, guys, and towards its westernmost point is the famous city of Karachi of Pakistan. Okay, Karachi was an important trading port back then also. Annexation of Sindh in 1843. Now what happened was, around this time, Lord Auckland, he will be the Governor General who will invade Afghanistan to install his puppet on the throne. Now, although East India Company, with the dint of force, was able to do that for a brief while, the Afghans rose en masse and massacred the British army. And that was the first Anglo-Afghan war, which became a big embarrassment for the Britishers. Remember, invincibility of the British, invincibility was the reason through which they were able to, that image of invincibility was used by the Britishers to keep Indians under check. But this defeat at the hands of Afghans naturally would have bolstered the ambitions of others. And therefore, quickly, East India Company wants to once again show with their bravery. It's like that Dada who has got beaten in some other gully, and now he comes back to his own yard and he tries to bash up everybody so that people here do not challenge him. So what East India Company does is, it once again interferes in the affairs of the Sindh chiefs. The Sindh chiefs had helped the East India Company, in fact, in the Afghan war. But East India Company raised fabricated allegations that these chiefs had not helped, and using that, they forced them once again to give more concessions. When the Sindhi chiefs resisted and fought back, then Charles Napier defeated the armies of the Sindh chiefs, and after that, it was annexed by the next Governor General, Lord Ellenborough. This war happens during the time of Lord Auckland. And after him, it will be Ellenborough who will take over. And during his period as Governor General of India, Sindh will be annexed. Charles Napier was the officer who actually got all of these things done, and he will be made the governor of Sindh subsequently. He had famously said that we have Sindh. Okay, so this is the figure of speech called as pun. When words have dual meanings. We have Sindh in a way tries to hint that we have that province, and also at the same time, the manner in which Sindh was taken, it was totally unfair, immoral and illegal. And that's why he said, we have Sindh. Okay. So British violated all the promises, fabricated lies against the chiefs of Sindh, and then annexed this particular province. It was done to show that Mardangi, that power that British had, so that others would be kept under check and control. So this is how Sindh will get annexed to the territory of British East India Company. Today, that is all that we have for this particular session. In our next class, we are going to see the Anglo-Punjab Wars, and along with that, we'll also study the Governor Generalship of Lord Dalhousie, the most important Governor General of East India Company's period for sure. I'll see you in my next class, guys. If you've liked this session, then do like it, leave some love in the comment box and share this video with your friends. Thank you.